All right. How's everybody doing this fine Tuesday afternoon? Thank you so much for coming out and being a part of this. I appreciate that. So my name is John Bartholomew. My daughter's on the Carl's U13 team and been in Texans for the last 5 to 6 years from academy up. And, I was talking to the coaches saying if there's anything that I could do that would be beneficial for you. So I've taught sports psychology for the last, I've been teaching that since I was in graduate school. That was the emphasis of the work that I was doing in graduate school. I do work with sort of physical activity, public health work as well now, some research that we're doing along those lines. But that's sort of the role that I play in the work I do. And so I said, if there's something I could talk about that would be beneficial, I'd be more than happy to do that. And so we thought it would be good to have sort of two levels, something that would focus kind of on younger kids, and we talked about developmental approaches. But then they were interested in if there was anything that I could do that might be better for older athletes, that would be more performance related, that could talk a little bit about that might be beneficial, that parents could benefit from as well. And so we thought anxiety and performance would be a nice thing to talk about because it's something that all athletes have to deal with at some point in their careers. And so we'll have this discussion. If there is something as I go along, if you don't understand it, if you have a question as we go along, we're going to have room for questions at the end. Please stick your hand up. I am more than happy to take questions. So don't worry about interrupting me or doing something along those lines. I'm happy to have this as a discussion. And again, we'll have time afterwards if you have any questions, and we can have chats about it at that point. All right? Cool. So let's talk about anxiety and how anxiety, because this is the question that I tend to get asked the most, are about issues about confidence and issues about anxiety and how you deal with stress as an athlete. So let's try to understand this process a little bit. One of the things that's a little bit wonky is a little slide advancement. So, like right now. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer, but that is just be patient with that. All right. So what is anxiety? I'm going to start off with a heinous description of this, but I think it's important to have that. So anxiety is a maladaptive condition. Maladaptive? What is that? What does that mean? Who's like a high school kid getting, going to take their pre-SATs or something like that and needs this? This is like a good word to hang on to. Maladaptive. Not adaptive, not beneficial. Right? So anxiety is bad. That's what maladaptive means. And so anxiety is bad, which is interesting. Most people, when you think about anxiety, you think that it's probably beneficial, right? A little bit of anxiety is a good thing, or having some anxiety is going to benefit performance. So let's try to understand, at the end of this, you should understand why I think that it's maladaptive and why we talk about it in that fashion. And one of the reasons for that is it comes from a perception of threat, characterized by unpleasant emotional reactions and increased autonomic nervous system activity. That just means increased heart rate, changes in blood pressure, blood flow, things along those lines. Your palms get really sweaty, your hands might start to shake a little bit, right? So it's basically like a little bit of a fear response that individuals are having, and it's that fear response that's going to be problematic. But when we start thinking about this with regards to performance, and why some individuals start to think about anxiety as a positive and something that we want to try to do for athletes, is because anxiety also has an increase in arousal, an increase in the energy level of the individual, and it turns out that's going to have pretty clear impacts on performance. So first, let's unpack this a little bit. Let's talk about the impact that arousal and energy level has on our performance. And then once we understand that, then we can shift and talk about anxiety in particular and issues that are associated with that. Okay? And state is and that's really what I'm talking about, is state anxiety, which varies from time to time. It's a really big game and it's an important moment, right? You're getting up and talking in front of a bunch of people. That sort of state anxiety that comes from that, as opposed to trait anxiety, which is general nervousness. Okay. Now, you can't have anxiety without an increase in arousal, and this increase in arousal is just the energy system that you have. So we have parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. Parasympathetic gets you excited. That's an increase in adrenaline. Parasympathetic helps you to relax. So how does changes in this energy level impact performance? That's the first thing that we're going to focus on. All right. So inverted U hypothesis is the first way that people think about this and have tried to understand this. And it's really, this is not, Moses coming down with stuff like, this is just guys thinking about how to talk about it, right? And it's called an inverted U because It looks like an inverted U, right? That's why we call this that. And so basically the idea is that energy moves, right? As we get a bigger increase in energy, we have an increase in performance, and then at some point it starts to drop off again. Okay? Relatively straightforward. Now people make the mistake of thinking that this just means that I need some moderate level, a little bit of energy is going to be perfect and a lot of energy is going to be bad. Well, the thing is, it differs based on the task that you're doing. Are you doing a task that's a really complex task where you have to think about a lot of what's going on? Are you trying a new position? Are you doing something different that you haven't done before? If that's the case, then what we see is over here, if it's a complex task, then you need lower levels of energy to be able to perform well, right? To be able to perform that task well. But if it's a simple task, if it's something that you've done a lot, if it's something that you don't have a lot of things to pay attention to, then you get that. It's okay to laugh at that. That's funny that I can't get this thing to work. That's all right. So in this, we see simple, right? So there's two things to notice with this, right? So if it's a simple task, something we do all the time, it shifts to the right. So the best level of energy, the best level of arousal is sort of in this higher level portion off to the right. You want more energy for doing this and this. So think about this as like playing chess, right? You want to be relaxed so you can make decisions. You can think about what you're doing. Think about these simple tasks as like lifting weights. You want to be super excited, right? The more excited you are, the better you're going to be. If you want to just kick the ball as hard as you can kick it, the more excited you can be, the harder you're going to be able to kick that. But if you're working on passing and working through cones, and it's something that, especially if you're a younger player and you're still learning how to do it, you need to be relaxed to be able to do that. If you're actually too excited, that's when you start making mistakes, right? And that's what this is getting at. So it's not a simple level of energy that we always want to be at. It's going to vary based on the thing that we're doing. Well, why is that? Like, why does that work? And why is that what we see happening? So, this is kind of the complicated stuff. If we think about, so when you're playing soccer, what are things that you need to pay attention to? Like, what's important for you to focus on? I'm asking athletes. What's important? Yes. Whatever the coach wants you to do, right? Whatever the coach is asking you to do, that's important information. What else is important information while you're playing soccer that you have to pay attention to? Where the ball is. Thank you very much. Good. What else do you have to pay attention to? Your teammates, where they're positioned, right? Why do we need to know that? Why do I need to know where my teammates are? So you can make good decisions and be able to pass to them? Okay, somebody sitting all the way in the back, some of those, there's a couple of people in gray players' shirts sitting right there who are looking at each other and laughing right now. So what is something else that you have to pay attention to that's important for you to focus on while you're playing? What do you got? This is what I do, like, so I teach college classes, and I do this all the time. Whoever sits in the back, I just call on those people that sit in the back. So what do you have to pay attention to? What's important to pay attention to? What do you got? Your opponents, where your opponents are. Thank you very much, right? What formation they're in, what formation they're in. Who's their best player, right? Who do you need to mark closely? That's all important information for you to pay attention to. What is important, what is information that's available that you don't want to pay attention to? What do you got, V? What do I not want to pay attention to? That's the other thing that I do, is I just call on my daughter's teammates, and so I'm going to be doing that as well. So Vanessa, what is something that is happening around me that I don't want to pay attention to? What about your parents screaming, right? I mean, I appreciate that because your mom is sitting there and you don't want to, make her feel bad. But yes, you don't want to pay attention to what your parents are thinking. In fact, that was like this is one of the hardships of having a daughter that plays soccer. Like I wanted, sons who played football, right? And I have daughters, and my one daughter plays soccer, and everything I tell her to do is wrong. You know what I mean? Everything I think she ought to do is wrong. So all I can do now is just tell her to run faster. You know what I mean? Like that's pretty much it. That's the only advice that I can give that is that, and half the time that's actually not even correct. Okay, so we don't want to pay attention to what our parents are saying. We don't want to pay attention to who's watching us. We don't want to pay attention to the other game and what's happening in the field next to us. okay? So when we think about the environment that we're in, we have things we need to pay attention to, and we have things that are not important to us that we don't want to pay attention to, right? So we can think about those two differences. So if you think about this graph, all of this in the gray is relevant information, things that are important for me to think about. It all fits in this box. Everything outside of that is not important for me to focus on, okay? So one of the things that happens is you get more excited, right? Your attentional focus narrows. In fact, you can do this study. So this study was done where if you run up and down the stairs and you get your heart rate up, right, and you increase your arousal and you increase your energy state, and then you measure peripheral vision, right? So how far do my fingers come before I can see them? That's a measure of peripheral. So hold your hands out, okay? And just do that and sort of see what I'm talking about. So when you can see your fingers stop. Okay? So you have people do that, and then you have them run. This could be like your science fair project. You have people run up and down the steps, and what happens is it gets more narrow. You actually can't see out here the same when you're aroused as you were otherwise. Because why? We're aroused normally because we're stressed and we have to pay attention to what's going on. And the people that do the best job of focusing their attention when they're aroused, they live longer, okay? And so we're more focused on that. That's something that's an important part of just how people focus. And, you know, it's really kind of cool. So they do this with soccer players, college soccer players, and they look at this degree of attentional narrowing when you're aroused. And the girls, and this was done in female athletes, the girls that showed the greatest reduction in attentional focus when they were aroused were the most likely to get injured during the season, right? So you get this very clear narrowing. So they're more likely to trip, they're more likely to run into somebody, they're more likely to have other problems. And so the injury likelihood was associated with that. That's one of the reasons why we think people who are undergoing a lot of stress get injured more often than other folks. And that's one of the things that happens is this attentional narrowing happens. And so this narrowing that we see of our attention are these black lines that come in. So at low levels of arousal, we have really nice, big, wide attention. We can focus on anything we want to. But at high levels of arousal, we get down here. So students, you've probably had this when you take an exam. Have you ever taken an exam, like a multiple choice exam, and you look at that first question, you're like, all right, I don't know that. And you get to the second question, you're like, yeah, I don't know that either. And then eventually you get a question you know, and you start to relax a little bit, and then you go back to the first question and you can answer it correctly. Right? So you start to relax, you're able to think about more things, you're able to focus on more things. That's where we're living right here. And down here is where we're really excited, we're overly excited, and we get this really narrow attentional focus. Okay? Does that make sense? Is everybody understanding where we are so far? All right, so how does this relate to this whole inverted U thing that we talked about? Now, our performance is going to be dependent upon getting task-relevant information. I can totally not do like a drop-the-mic moment in this, you know what I mean? Because I can't like just bam, and then have it come up when I want it to. There you go. All right, so if you look at this inverted U, what do we see here? This is the point where the attention narrows, and it's getting all the information that's important to us and excluding all the information that isn't important to us, right? Have you been in games where you're kind of slow, your mind's wandering, you're focusing on different things, right? Early in a game, this is very often, this is, something that, I have seen occasionally occur with, my daughter's not here, I can say it, her teammates here. Sometimes this is what you do, right? Okay, so this is what we do sometimes in games. So this is where we are, where we're flat. Where our attention is so broad, we can get in everything that's about the game, but then we're picking up all this other information. Our mind's wandering. We're thinking about what we're going to do if the dance is coming up, if we have homework that night, right? If we have something else that we have to do, our mind is wandering and thinking about these different things. And as a result of that, our performance drops off precipitously. Likewise, up here, as this starts to narrow, our performance starts to drop off as well. Because now we're missing task-relevant information. I don't see other individuals. So have you ever seen, like in football, where a new quarterback will come in and invariably they throw an interception? And they interview the quarterback afterwards, and what does the quarterback say? Why did he throw the interception? He didn't see him. Well, he's not lying. He physically didn't see it. Because they're so excited and the attention is narrowed so much that they can't see that safety coming across, and so they end up throwing an interception. And that's exactly what's going on. And the same thing happens to soccer players, is you don't notice what's happening in the formation. You don't see people move, so you end up not being able to make the passes that you should be able to make, right? And that's what's happening up here. So that is tunnel vision, where you have this narrow focus, you're missing information, and as a result of that, your performance is dropping off and you're not doing as well, where here you're flat. And so this becomes a really important relationship for us to understand. Okay? Any questions so far? All right, now, here's the thing. So, you notice anything that's like really convenient about this graph? It just seems to work out really nicely. You know what I mean? When you look at it, it just seems odd. When our attention narrows, where does it go? Anybody? Isn't it convenient that it's all focused on task-relevant information? That you get this increase in arousal, you get this narrowed attentional focus, and all of it focuses on the things that we need to focus on? Think that always happens? No. So what determines what you focus on and what you think about? What determines that is the source of the arousal. And why are you energized? Why do you have that increase in arousal? That's what determines where your attention goes. So anxiety draws attention. If the reason you're aroused is you're afraid, because you're afraid of the opponent, you're afraid about what's going to happen if we do poorly, you're afraid about what your parents are going to say, you're afraid about what the coach is going to say, then you get this anxiety. And this is why I talk about anxiety being a negative, being maladaptive, being a bad thing, is you get this increase in anxiety, and it shifts your attention to that source. So not only do we have a narrowing of attentional focus, but we have a shift of that focus to the source of stress, to the source of the thing that's bothersome to us, that's problematic to us. And that's the problem with anxiety, right? So we try to get players worked up before games, we try to talk about things, give people pep talks, what have you. That's fine. Where coaches make mistakes, where parents make mistakes, is they very often try to basically scare the kids into what's getting excited, right? About talking about how important this is, what's happening, and why we have to win, and things along those lines. And it shifts that attention away from the task at hand to, holy crap, what's going to happen if we lose this? Right? And so you start to think about those things, and it drives that attention away. And so that's why I think that that's maladaptive. And so, but you know what's interesting is if you don't have enough attention, right? What do? Like, we blindfolded you, right? Do you just give up? You still try to play. So what do? You react, you guess as to what's going on. You hit the ball really hard, right? You just play it. So what happens when you're overly anxious and you can't process, you can't think? You just kick the ball as hard as you can, right? So we just have these reactionary types of performances that undermine your ability to be successful, and that's where you don't process information well, and that's where this happens. The other thing that happens is it interferes with coordinated movement. So when you are anxious, you get an increase in muscle tension. So do me a favor, put your hand just on the seat in front of you, and tap your finger as fast as you can. Okay? All right, now, make a muscle with your finger. Now tap your finger while you're making a muscle. You can't. And that's the problem with being anxious as well, as being anxious leads to muscle tension, leads to physical tension, and you just don't have coordinated movement, and that's when people get hurt. People that are under stress, people that are tense get injured as a result of that, because you don't have coordinated movement, and it undermines what you're trying to make happen. And so motivation through fear becomes really problematic if you're doing it well, right? I mean, if you're really bringing about that anxiety, that becomes problematic in individuals. And if you're focused on that, that's an issue. Now, if that's not what you're doing, very often that's not the case, and your athletes just get, you all get nervous anyway, and you get really anxious. So, changes in energy provide a nice clean change in performance. that we can think about. But anxiety shifts it to the right, and you see this. So when we think about it, this is what we're talking about in terms of this nice clean change, right? A nice, you can still perform pretty well here. But anxiety, it may drive arousal up to a point where it's positive, and then it just collapses, and you completely fall apart. That's where athletes choke, and when you really undermine your performance in terms of what's going on, and why we want to try to avoid that. So what makes athletes nervous and anxious? Well, the biggest problem that athletes have, and the things that they're most concerned about, is variations in performance. When they're performing well, when they're performing poorly, okay? So I want you to think about, I'm going to have another question for you. So here's games going across here. Here's performance right here. And here's a performance in one of the games. How's he doing? Is that good? Is that bad? Average. Who thinks it's average? Okay, we're going to vote. We're going to have it's poor, weak performance, average, excellent performance. Okay? So, who thinks it's poor? All right? Who thinks it's average? Who thinks it's fabulous? Who cannot be bothered to raise their hand on a simple question that I'm not even grading you on? Thank you. All right. I have that response all the time with my classes. All right. Who says you can't tell? Oh, this is the trick question. It's always this is the only time you're going to get it today, but if you ever come to Texas and take my class, it is always the mystery answer that I haven't shared with you, right? So, why can't you tell? There's not enough information. There's not a scale associated with it. But even if it's a scale, right? Even if the scale is goals, right? Even if the scale is positive plays, there's no way to really interpret what's going on because we have to think about patterns of performance, right? And so, all right, well, that's good. That's a good performance, if that's the track you're on, right? If you've been performing down here your first couple of games and you get up to this, and then you're on this trajectory that's positive, then that's a fabulous performance, right? Okay, that's okay. If you're just sort of hanging out, and you've been doing the same way, you're consistent, you're moving along, it's not great, you're not improving, but it's sort of hanging out, that's not terrible. That's no good. If this is where you've been your first couple of games, and then this is where you are, and you're sort of on this downward trajectory, then that's a negative performance. So why do I share this? I share this because one of the biggest mistakes we make as athletes, regardless of the sport, is to think that any individual game is an indicator of whether I'm any good at this or not, right? Like this is the referendum on whether I'm any good at soccer, is what I do. And if I have a bad game, then I suck at soccer, I'm terrible at soccer, this is a horrible thing, right? Or if I have a great game, then I'm so awesome, right? It's not about individual performances. That's just a moment in time. It's about patterns of performance over the course of the year. And that's really the issue. And the more that we focus on any individual performance as an indicator of whether or not I'm any good at this, then obviously you're going to be anxious because the stakes are enormous. If every time I play, I'm questioning whether or not I'm any good at this, and this is going to be the thing that indicates whether I'm good at this, or if I've arrived, or I've sort of gotten to that point that finally, okay, now I'm a good soccer player. I finally had a great game against a good team. Okay, so now I'm a good soccer player, right? And then the next time it changes. The stakes associated with that are enormous. I mean, think about that. If you went to work every day and it was a question today whether or not you were any good at your job was going to be determined by your performance today, you'd be miserable, absolutely miserable. But athletes do that all the time. And they think about things along those, and the implications of this are huge. Anybody play golf? A couple of people play golf? All right. Go, you can put your hand up if you play golf. Okay, so his son's like, get your hand up, Dad, you play golf. Golfers are always trying to maximize their performance, right? They're always trying to be the best player they can be every time they go out. And the downside of that is they stop taking chances. They play to the clubs that they think they can be successful with, right? They try to maximize performance with every shot they take, and as a result of that, they don't take risks, and they don't get any better. If you're trying to maximize your performance every time you play soccer, are you really going to try to beat people one-on-one? What if you mess up? That becomes a problem. Now it's a bad performance, and now I'm not any good at soccer. But if we think about this as a performance over time, of looking at change over time, then I can be more aggressive. Then I can take people on. I can take risks. Because if I make a mistake this game, that's okay, because it's not just about this moment. It's not just about this game. It's about my improvement as a player and how I think about that. And that, to me, if I could think about anything to try to get across to athletes, and we talked about athletes, I mean, it is. So, okay. So if you're over 6 foot tall and you have a pickup truck, what do you get constantly asked to do? Help your friends move, right? Constantly. If you teach sports psychology at the University of Texas, what do you constantly get asked? Why does my kid suck at basketball right now, right? He's so much better than this. Would you please come talk to my child about basketball, right? I get this request. Actually, my wife gets this request all the time. People are constantly talking to my wife about, could you please, you think John could come over and watch a couple of games and maybe talk to my son a little bit or talk to my daughter a little bit about what's going on? And the problem almost invariably is that the athletes and the family is so focused on individual performances. They're struggling, they have a bad performance, oh my gosh, get me a sports psychologist. But then the next game he plays well, no, it's okay, we don't need to talk to you, right? He played well today, we're good. I mean, it's really interesting, those differences. So absolute performance is not the issue that you should be focused on. You should be focused on performance over time and improvement over time. And to the extent that you're seeing that, then you should be pretty satisfied with what's going on and happy with what's going on. If you're not seeing that, then that's a concern. As this continues from game to game, then you need to think about change and what to do with that, okay? So how do I do this with my daughter? So we talk every game. And in fact, we talk so much every game afterwards that, you know, she'll come in, like if they lose, or if it's really hot and then she's just kind of grumpy and miserable, she'll get in the car and she's like, I don't want to talk about it. I'm like, okay. So we give it a little bit of time. We let her recover. We let her relax. And then I always talk about two things, right? First question is, what did you do well today? Because it doesn't matter what happened. It doesn't matter you could lose 5-0 and you did something well, right? If you played, you did something well. You made a good pass. You challenged the ball well. You made some good decisions. You did something well. So let's talk about that first. And then secondly, what did you do poorly? Now, my wife doesn't like me to say it that way. She likes me to say, is there a better choice you could have made, right? Was there something that you were unhappy with that you might want to change? That's how she wants to talk to me. I think you can just say, what did you do poorly? And that reinforces the notion that it's not about this game, right? You can talk that way because it's just a game. It's just one time you can talk about playing poorly, right? So what did you do poorly? Because you did something poorly. Nobody plays a whole game and does nothing poorly. So we talk about that. What did you do poorly? And then that leads to a notion that again tries to feed into this idea of focusing over the course of the season of what's your one big thing. What are we going to focus on? And that should be tied to something you can see, which is not always easy, but then it should also be tied to the feedback that the coach gives. So some of the feedback that Carl gave Emma in January was working on closing down 10 yards. Right? 10 yards from a player being able to close with aggression and being more aggressive and being more physical with some of the feedback that she got. So that's our one big thing. This whole spring season, we've been focused on being aggressive, of attacking, of making things happen and being physical. And that's been the whole discussion that we've had. And every game we talk about that. That's what we focus on. And when that's done, we're going to focus on something else. And I can tell you, it's going to be shooting, right? That's probably what we're going to focus on for our next big thing, but we're going to pick another big thing, and then that's what we're going to focus on. Being confident in your shot and taking shots is probably going to be the next big thing that we talk about until she gets that. Now, as we have these discussions, she gets frustrated. Why are we always talking about improvement? Because she wants to be done. She wants to okay, now I'm a good soccer player and we don't have to talk about this anymore. And I asked her, I was like, when are you going to stop getting better at soccer? Right? Athletes, when do you stop getting better? When you stop playing. This is the deal. This is what it is. And if you don't like that, then you shouldn't be an athlete. That is just part of being an athlete. Part of being an athlete is getting better. Part of that being an athlete, and in fact, I tell her this all the time, athletics is about getting punched in the face and dealing with it. That's what it's about. When you play great teams, they are going to come out and they are going to hit you hard, and you need to be able to respond to that. You're going to have negative games. We were in a game a couple of years ago. We were in a tournament, we're in the semifinals, and it went to penalties, and it took like 9 penalties to settle it, right? I mean, it was fabulous. Parents were coming from other fields over to watch. Like, it was just so exciting, okay? And we lost, which was brutal, but it was okay. I mean, Emma she missed hers, but a bunch of kids missed hers. Like, nobody felt it was like their fault, you know? So that was a positive, and the goalie made a couple of saves. When we're driving back, and what I told my daughter was, that was beautiful. I mean, that was terrible, but that was beautiful. And you have played a lot of boring soccer games to have that experience, you know? Like, that's why you play, is to have that experience and to be that excited and be that into what's going on and making that happen. Yeah, I know you lost, and it's horrible that you lost, but man, that was fabulous. That was so beautiful, right? I mean, it's a very different way to think about things, and it's a very different way to talk about it, because it was beautiful. I mean, it's just to watch them be so in the moment, excited about what they were going on, even though they lost. I mean, it was just a fabulous thing to have those experiences, because let me tell you, you don't have them very often in life. You don't have a lot of experiences where you are totally locked in on what's going on, especially as a group of individuals. Sport's it. You don't have this in other things that are going on. And so win or lose, it's those types of situations that become important. And a focus on that helps to relieve the anxiety, but increase the energy that individuals have and what happens with it. Okay. And then that one big thing, set your goal for that practice and what you're doing after that point. Okay. So sport is about improvement. The only time you stop improving is when you're done playing. When the one big thing is over, you focus on something else. So this idea that I'm eventually going to be good, that I'm eventually going to be done, that's a fallacy. You're constantly looking to improve and constantly trying to move forward. So, does winning have no importance? Well, of course winning has importance. One of the great things about being on a club is they try to place you on a team with like-level athletes, where you're playing with players that are similar in ability to you, and you're playing against teams with similar ability. If that's the case, then winning gives you an indication of what your performance level is, right? Are you executing appropriately? Are you doing what you should be doing? But it's not the end-all. It's an indication of performance. It is not the total focus of what's going on. Okay, so how do you control energy? If you're anxious, if you're nervous, what do? The best thing to do is take a breath. So there is, Ken Ravizza is probably the best sports psychologist for baseball. Has worked with the whole California Angels system, has worked with Cal State Fullerton. He was their sports psychologist when they went and won the World Series. Augie Garrido knows him really well. He's the sports psychologist for UT Austin. He brings him in to be able to do it. And he's done all these different things with sports psychology and performance and trying to help people, things along those lines. And he goes back and he talks to athletes and says, what did you keep? Like, what is the thing that you hung on to? What was most important to you? And they all say, take a breath. That if you're nervous, take a breath. Deep breathing, and do this, and we're sort of getting into this point where people are in tournaments and things along those lines, you're getting into big games. If you're nervous, breathe, and breathe in a 1-to-2 ratio, okay? So, all right, who's like in like 6th, 7th grade and knows what ratios are? So if we're doing a 1-to-2 ratio and you breathe in on a 3 count, what do you breathe out on? 6, you can say that loud. Very good. Someone over here. Fabulous. All right. 6. So let's try this. We're going to breathe in on 3. And we're going to breathe out on 6. Ready? Breathe in. 1, 2, 3. Breathe out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's not easy, is it? Take some practice. Try that again. Breathe in on 1, 2, 3. Out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's amazing how much it helps you to relax. And then the other thing that you can do with that is when you breathe in, tense your muscles, hold, and breathe out, and relax those muscles. It's amazing how much it helps you to relax. It's easy to do. You can do it in the car while you're driving to tournaments. If you find yourself getting nervous, you can do it on the sidelines and people don't make fun of you, like they don't even notice that that's what you're doing, right? And so that's a positive thing you can implement at any time you want to. That is the best way to take the edge off. That's the best way to relax. What if you're flat? How do you improve emotion? You want a routine, and a routine that builds up into games so that you do the same thing before every game. That is not a superstition. Superstitions control you, right? Like you have to do it or you're in trouble. You control your routine. You decide what you do. And so then what should that routine have? Music is fabulous. To listen to music, to find the right thing. I'm a big fan of AC/DC. I think that's actually really pretty good. Clean versions of Eminem are pretty good. You know what I mean? Like there's some really good songs that help you to focus. And so that's a positive thing. You can use self-talk in terms of what are you going to focus on? What am I doing today? How you talk to yourself and actually have that conversation, and you can give yourself a pep talk. The other thing is, so how many parents are like, really? We have to buy these yellow shirts? Like, why are we buying these yellow shirts? They can't wear their gray shirts to warm up. You know what I mean? We got to buy yellow shirts. Like, what? Really? Okay, why do you buy the yellow shirts? Why? Well, one thing is, it looks sharp. But then the other thing is, from a sports psych perspective, you put your yellow shirts on, it's time to start warming up. And it's sort of like I'm taking off the person I am outside of soccer, and I'm starting to put my game person on. And so you warm up with those, you're going through that, but it's really the shift of taking off the yellow shirt and putting on the red shirt, putting on the white jersey. That is a symbol that now I'm ready to play. And you should think about that when you're taking that off, you're like, okay, I'm done warming up. I'm not just messing around anymore. I'm just not knocking shots around. I'm not joking around anymore. That's done. I put my game jersey on, and now it's time to go. And so it's this nice delineation from going to practice to where you're going in terms of performance. And it's a little thing, and you think it's silly, but if you do that all the time, you combine that with music beforehand, and it's the same music that you listen to focus that in self-talk, it can be really powerful in terms of helping you focus and preventing sort of those negative performances early on. So summary. Low energy is important for complex tasks. When you're learning, when I talk about this, and you're doing something different, it's a new skill that you're learning, or the coach is teaching you, or you're trying to figure out what's happening, being relaxed helps. The more relaxed you are, the better the performance is going to be. If you don't know the information you're being tested on at school, in 3, out 6, right? Relax a little bit and you're going to do better with that. So it definitely helps that. High energy helps well-learned tasks. It helps you to focus your attention because you already know the answer, and it helps you to do that. The better you study, the more being excited before an exam helps you. Anxiety, the problem with fear is it shifts tasks away from it and undermines performance. And so how do we shift that? We try to focus on improvement over time to be able to reduce anxiety, reduce concerns about performance. You pick one big thing. If you've got to fix 5 things at once, that's not a long-term focus. That's a right now focus. And it's too much to do. You can't make it happen. So you focus on one thing. What's the one big thing? And you fix the biggest thing first. Like, let's take care of this, and then we'll move on and think about something else. That's that long-term progression that we're interested in doing, and develop a routine to try to help you to relax if you're too nervous and to build the right level of energy as you move forward. And I think you can apply this, and hopefully you'll notice some changes in your performance and how you're able to execute. And so with that, I'll take questions or comments, and thank you very much for your time in coming. So we are videotaping this, and we're going to put it on the YouTube channel to be able to do that, and they've got copies of my slides, and we're probably going to make those available to folks, correct, Allison? So those will be posted as well for both talks. So the other talk that I did, we videotaped that's focused more on positive youth development. That's going to be on the YouTube channel, and the slides for that is going to be available as well. What else? Yes, sir. I think you should, one of the transformative things for my daughter, we were playing academy, their team lost, and the coach pulled her aside and said, "This is the best game you've ever played." And it was stunning to her to hear that. That was the first time she really started to separate this idea and to think about improvement over time instead of just what happens in the game. I mean, it really changed how she approached soccer. It was really made a big deal. And so you have that conversation with the coach. It equips the coach to be able to have those conversations and to be able to move that forward and what they think about and how they talk about things. And if there's something that's really problematic, because very often the coaches don't know. I mean, you've got a decent group of individuals that you're talking to, right? And so you may not always see. So yes, if you have something that your child is bothered by or is having concerns about, is worried about, goalies it happens to all the time, but other players, they're worried about, they haven't been shooting well or they had a big miss and that's something that's bothering them. Whatever the situation is, yes, you should certainly share that with your coach, have that ability to talk about that, and then also just do simple, like I said, simple things like trying to breathe so that they can regain a sense of control over what's going on, and it helps to break sort of this negative thought process that they get in. Anything else? I think I'm contractually obligated to have 3 questions. So we've had 2. Any more? All right. Well, thank you very much. And if you just want to come up and talk to me afterwards, feel free. And thank you very much for coming out on a Tuesday.